Hi, I'm Joy, and I'll never forget my last birthday. My sister sent me a gift, but when my daughter saw it, she screamed, "Mom, don't open it!" I leaned in and my blood ran cold. That wasn't a present. It was a trap. A setup meant to ruin me on the one day that should have felt safe. 10 minutes later, the cops were at my door, and that was only the beginning. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. You won't believe how far my own family went to destroy me. Birthdays had stopped being special a long time ago. When you're the youngest in a family that only remembers you when they need something, you learn not to expect balloons or surprise dinners. My birthday routine was simple. Pancakes with Alara, a phone call from Mom that sounded more like a business transaction than a celebration, and maybe a card if Celeste remembered I existed. That morning had started out the same.
Alara had been up early, padding around in her fuzzy socks, whispering to herself as she worked on something at the kitchen table. "Don't peek, Mom," she said, when I tried to see what she was doing. So I poured myself coffee and pretended not to notice the mess of markers and glue sticks she'd left behind. When she finally handed me the card, a folded piece of construction paper covered in hearts and misspelled words, I felt something warm in my chest. "Happy birthday, Mom. You're my favorite person." I don't think I'd heard anyone say that to me in years. I kissed her forehead, grateful for her in a way that made my throat ache. We were still sitting at the table, finishing off our pancakes, when the knock came. It wasn't unusual. Delivery drivers were in and out of the neighborhood all the time, but Alara stiffened like a deer caught in headlights. "Stay here," I said as I walked to the door. On the porch sat a medium-sized brown box. No bright wrapping paper, no cheerful happy birthday sticker, just a shipping label with my name and address printed in bold letters. The return address was a P.O. box in a city I didn't recognize. No note, no sender. "Package for you," the driver said with a quick wave before heading back to his truck. Alara had followed me despite my instructions. She stopped in the doorway, eyes fixed on the box. "Mom, don't open it." Her voice wasn't playful. It was sharp, almost panicked. I frowned, kneeling next to it. "What do you mean, sweetheart? It's probably from Grandma or Aunt Celeste." "No." She shook her head, hands curling into fists at her sides. "Don't touch it. Can't you see it?" That choice of words made my skin prickle. See what? It was just a box. But as I leaned closer, details started to stand out. The heavy-duty tape that looked like it had been applied in a rush, a faint chemical smell like varnish, the barcode partially scratched off. And then I noticed something else. The handwriting on the label wasn't printed at a store. Someone had scrawled over it with a black marker, thick and messy. I didn't say it out loud, but my gut had already made the connection. Celeste. It reminded me of the time she'd begged me to let her use my address for a few harmless shipments. I'd been naive then, telling myself she was just moving art supplies for her gallery side hustle. But deep down, I'd known better. My phone buzzed on the counter, jolting me out of my thoughts. Celeste's name flashed across the screen. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but some part of me needed to hear what she had to say. "Happy birthday, little sis," she sang when I picked up, her voice coated in fake sweetness. I kept my tone even. "Yeah, thanks." "Did you get our special gift yet?" The way she said special made my stomach knot. "Yes," I lied, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "I opened it." She chuckled softly. "You've always been stronger than you know. Enjoy it." And then she hung up. I stood there, staring at the silent phone, Alara's words echoing in my head. "Don't open it. This wasn't a gift. It was a trap." My hands were trembling as I picked up the phone again, this time dialing the police non-emergency line. "I received a suspicious package that I believe is tied to an active investigation," I said,
when the dispatcher answered. My voice sounded calm, but I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. Elara sat back at the kitchen table, clutching her birthday card to her chest like it was armor. I wanted to reassure her, tell her everything would be okay, but I wasn't sure it would be. 10 minutes later, there was another knock. But this time, it wasn't a neighbor dropping off cake. 2 uniformed officers stood at my door, already pulling on their gloves. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions about this package." One of the officers, a tall man with a clean-shaven face and a voice that sounded more like a statement than a question, gestured toward the box on the floor. His partner, shorter and stockier, was already pulling out a notepad. I stepped aside, letting them into the kitchen. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. Elara stayed glued to her chair at the table, hugging her knees, watching everything with wide, silent eyes. The tall officer snapped on a pair of latex gloves. "Did you open the package?" "No," I replied. "It arrived about 15 minutes ago. I haven't touched it beyond moving it inside." His partner scribbled something down. "Do you know who sent it?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "It's from my family. My sister, most likely. But there's no note." The taller one crouched beside the box, studying the label. "P.O. box in Duluth," he muttered to himself. "That's not unusual in itself, but combined with the lack of sender info." He trailed off, looking at me again. "You said it's from your sister. What's her name?" "Celeste." I almost choked on the word. "She runs an art business, or at least that's what she calls it." He exchanged a glance with his partner, the kind of look that says more than words. They asked me to step back. The stocky one carried the box to the counter, carefully slicing through the heavy tape. My breath caught as the top flaps opened. Inside, beneath a layer of bubble wrap, were several small, oddly shaped, decorative pieces. Ceramic figurines, delicate but cheaply made. They were nestled around a thick stack of documents, shipping receipts, and invoices, all printed with my name and address. "What is this?" I whispered, leaning closer. "Please don't touch anything," the taller officer said sharply, holding up a hand. But I knew that packaging. The crumpled invoices, the stickers from a particular supply company, it was the same style Celeste used when she bragged about her business. I'd seen her Instagram posts, the ones where she called herself a creative entrepreneur. My stomach sank. They began photographing everything, moving methodically. That's when my phone rang again. Celeste. I froze, staring at the screen until one of the officers nodded. "You can take it," he said. I pressed the phone to my ear. "What do you want?" Her voice was syrupy, but there was a razor edge beneath it. "I hope you're enjoying your gift." "Oh, enjoy? Don't talk too much. You don't want to drag your kid into this." Every muscle in my body tightened. I glanced at Elara, who was watching me, her little hands clutching that birthday card like it could shield her from all of this. "What are you talking about?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay even. Celeste laughed softly. "You're smart. You'll figure it out." And she hung up. Yet I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, my mind racing. She knew the police were here. This wasn't some accident, it was orchestrated. I turned back to the officers. "Do I need a lawyer?" The taller one paused, then said carefully, "This is part of an ongoing investigation. We'll need to follow up with you." I swallowed hard. My hands trembled, but I nodded. "Then I'll get one." Inside, though, I made myself a promise. Not this time. I wasn't going to let Celeste drag me down and bury me. As they repackaged the contents, Elara slid off her chair and came to my side, pressing her small hand into mine. I squeezed it gently, grounding myself in that tiny bit of warmth. When the officers left, carrying the box with them, one paused at the door. "Ma'am," he said, his tone firm, "don't leave town for the next few weeks." And then they were gone. Don't leave town. What exactly did my sister put me in the middle of? I muttered under my breath, but Alara was still close enough to hear. She sat cross-legged on the couch, holding the birthday card she'd made me like it was the only safe thing in the room. "Are you in trouble, Mom?" she asked quietly, her big brown eyes searching mine. I exhaled slowly, sitting beside her. "No, sweetheart, but your aunt wants me to be." I smoothed her hair back, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "This isn't about us doing anything wrong. It's about someone else trying to make it look that way." That was true, and I meant it, but the pit in my stomach told me this wasn't some passing inconvenience. This was Celeste. And when Celeste wanted to ruin someone, she didn't just scratch the surface. She dug. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time that day, I let my mind wander somewhere I usually avoided. Home? The one I grew up in, the one I learned early on wasn't mine in the same way it was Celeste's. Back then, I was the dependable one. Quiet, agreeable, the one who didn't make waves. Celeste? She was too fragile to be upset. That's what Mom always said, like her fragility was a crown she wore, making her untouchable. I could still see it, the day Celeste knocked over one of Mom's prized vases, the kind that sat on the dining room buffet no one was allowed to touch. It shattered into pieces across the floor. I was 7, Celeste 9. Before I could even process what had happened, she pointed at me. "Joy did it," she said, voice trembling with fake innocence. I hadn't even been near the vase. But Mom didn't look at her. She looked at me. "You're the big sister," she scolded, though I wasn't. "Be responsible." That was the first time I took the blame for her. It wasn't the last. There were other moments, each one a notch in the pattern that became our family dynamic. Like when Celeste got a brand new pink bike for getting a most improved certificate in choir. I got a nod and a "good job, honey" when I graduated high school with honors. It wasn't just favoritism. It was survival training. For me. I learned early that if I kept my head down, if I handled things, there'd be less chaos. So I handled them. I handled her. And that didn't stop when we grew up. In my early 20s, Celeste called me in tears because she couldn't get approved for an apartment. "Just put it in your name," she'd begged. "It's only temporary. You're so strong. You can handle it." That word, strong, became a leash. I signed for the apartment. Later, a credit card. Then a so-called business license when she decided she was an entrepreneur. Each time, I told myself it was the last. Each time, she came back with another emergency. And I let her. Because that's who I'd been trained to be, the one who could take the hit and keep standing. Now, sitting in my living room with Alara curled into my side, I felt the weight of all those years pressing down. Of every signature I'd given, every bill I'd covered, every time I'd believed that keeping the peace was more important than being right. They always saw me as the one who could lose everything and still survive. And maybe that's why Celeste thought she could throw me to the wolves now. Because history told her I wouldn't fight back. But she was wrong. I stared at the spot where the box had been. The emptiness it left behind a reminder of how quickly things could spiral. This wasn't just about my sister's selfishness. It was about a lifetime of being cast as the one who could absorb all the blows so no one else had to. And I was done. For the first time in years, I felt something sharp and unfamiliar cutting through the exhaustion. Anger. I didn't know what scared me more. That Celeste thought I'd take the fall again, or that a part of me almost expected to. My phone buzzed again, and this time it wasn't Celeste. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating if I had the energy for whatever script she was about to read to me. Alara, still perched beside me, gave me a worried look. "Are you going to answer it?" she asked. I sighed and pressed the green button. "Hi, honey," Mom said, her voice warm and syrupy, the same voice she used when she wanted to sound gentle before sliding the knife in. Celeste told me you overreacted about a little birthday surprise. It's such a shame your day had to turn into all this. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. Overreacted? Mom, the police were here. They took the package. Does that sound like overreacting to you? She let out a laugh. Light, dismissive, like I was a child complaining about a skinned knee. Oh, Joy. You know how these things get blown out of proportion. I'm sure it was nothing serious. You've always been a little dramatic when it comes to your sister. That word, dramatic, landed like a slap. My grip tightened on the phone. Mom, there were documents in that box, in my name. This isn't some prank. This is fraud, or worse. Well, sweetheart, she said, her tone sharpening just slightly. Celeste can't handle this kind of stress. She's going through enough. You've always been the strong one. You can recover from these kinds of things. Something in me stilled. My breath caught in my throat. You're the one who can be lost. It took me a second to even process that sentence. My hand went numb around the phone. What? I whispered, though I wasn't sure she even heard me. You know what I mean, she said quickly, as if brushing it off. You're resilient. You'll land on your feet no matter what happens. Celeste isn't like that. She wouldn't survive this. Alara had been pretending to read her card at the table, but I knew from the way her shoulders stiffened that she'd heard every word. Mom, I said, my voice low and shaking. Do you hear yourself? You're saying it's okay if I take the fall for Celeste because you think I can survive it? Don't be so harsh, she replied softly, as though I'd misunderstood her. This family needs peace. We don't need more drama. There it was, the same script they'd been reading my entire life. Don't upset Celeste. Don't make a scene. Don't put yourself first. I suddenly felt like I was 7 again, being scolded for pointing out that I hadn't broken the vase. I didn't even remember hanging up. One moment I was listening to her breathe on the line, and the next I was staring at my phone on the table, my own breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. I closed my eyes, and a memory pushed its way to the front of my mind. A family party 2 years ago. Celeste had just opened her business. My parents were practically glowing as they toasted her success. I'd started to share some good news of my own, a promotion I'd worked hard for, but Mom had cut me off with a sweet smile. Don't bring up your job, Joy. Today is about her. I'd spent the rest of the night moving from one corner of the house to another, trying to disappear in plain sight until I finally just left without saying goodbye. It hit me then. That wasn't an isolated moment. That was the blueprint. That's why Mom's words didn't even surprise me as much as they should have. I looked at Alara. She was still at the table, staring down at her card like it could protect her from this family we were tied to. They've always known I'd take the fall, I said quietly to myself. That ends now. Alara reached over, her little hand resting on mine. You're not lost, Mom, she said, her voice small but sure. They just don't see you. Her words should have comforted me, but instead, they made me realize how close I was to giving up. When the house grew quiet and Alara finally drifted off to sleep, I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The dark felt heavier than usual, the kind that presses down on you until it's hard to breathe. My phone sat on the nightstand, its screen black, but I couldn't stop thinking about the last call. My mother's voice, her words. You're the one who can be lost. I repeated them in my head until they felt carved into my skin. I rolled onto my side and reached for my phone, not because I wanted to talk to anyone, but because I couldn't stand to be still. I scrolled through old photos, the kind I usually avoided. Birthdays, holidays, family dinners. In every single one, Celeste glowed at the center of attention, surrounded by parents who adored her. And me? I was always off to the side, smiling too wide, dressed too simply, there but never really seen. Even now, I couldn't tell which stung more, the memories or the fact that I'd kept them, like proof of my own invisibility. My chest ached as my thoughts spiraled. Maybe I should just let it go. Maybe I should stay quiet. That's what they wanted, wasn't it? For me to keep the peace, to be the one who bends so nothing breaks. It had been my role all my life, the fixer, the buffer, the one who cleaned up Celeste's messes before anyone outside the family noticed. Maybe this was just another mess. The faint vibration on my nightstand startled me. I picked up the phone. A new message blinked on the screen. Celeste, don't make this worse for yourself. Handle it quietly, and it'll go away. I read the words 3 times. Handle it quietly. It sounded so casual, so reasonable, like she was doing me a favor. But that was her gift, making her manipulations sound like kindness. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, ready to type something, anything, but I couldn't. Another message. You've always been good at staying in the background. Don't ruin that now. The bile rose in my throat. She knew I was exhausted. She knew I wanted to collapse into the old role, to let her make the rules. And for a moment, I hated myself for it. I wanted to agree, to make it all stop. I needed air. I left my room and padded down the hall to Ilara's. The glow from her nightlight softened the edges of her little room, making it feel like a sanctuary. She was still awake, lying on her side, eyes half open. "You okay, Mom?" she asked, her voice groggy but clear. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. "Just checking on you, baby." She propped herself on one elbow, studying me like she could see past the smile I was trying to hold. "You always tell me to speak up when something's wrong," she said softly. "Are you going to?" Her words cut deeper than any of Celeste's barbs. They stripped me bare. I'd spent years teaching her to be braver than I ever was, to use her voice, to never let anyone make her small. And here I was, ready to lie down and stay quiet because it was easier. "I don't know," I admitted, my throat tight. She reached out, her small hand curling around my fingers. "You should. If something's wrong, you should." It wasn't advice. It was a reminder of who I was supposed to be. For her, if not for myself. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence stretch. My mother's words echoed again. "You're the one who can be lost." For so long, I'd heard that as an insult, a warning, a cage. But as I stared into the dark, I felt something shift. If I could be lost, I could also walk away. I didn't need their permission to exist. I didn't need to carry the weight of their messes anymore. I picked up my phone one last time, stared at Celeste's messages, and whispered to myself, "Not this time." Now, the next morning, I woke up with a decision and a plan. I hadn't slept much, but somehow my body felt alert, as though my mind had been working through the night while I stared into the dark. There was no more room for sitting still, hoping this would blow over. That's exactly what Celeste wanted. For me to freeze, let the storm swallow me, and take the blame quietly. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee, the steam curling around my face as I scribbled a to-do list on a yellow notepad. It felt almost absurdly ordinary, like I was making a grocery list, except every bullet point had the weight of survival. Call the detective. Gather old paperwork. Find anything tying Celeste to this business without dragging me down with her. I underlined that last part twice. Before I could second-guess myself, I called the number the officers had given me yesterday. A calm, clipped male voice answered, introducing himself as Detective Harris. "We've identified that shipment as part of a broader investigation," he said after confirming my information. "Several packages tied to your sister's business have similar profiles. We'll need you to provide a written statement and any documentation that proves your non-involvement." "Non-involvement," I repeated, leaning back in my chair. "So you're already assuming my name's on more than just that box." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Miss Dalton, I'll be frank. This goes beyond simple fraud. We're looking at possible distribution of counterfeit goods, the kind of thing that could carry federal consequences. My grip tightened on the phone. Federal consequences. Celeste had dragged me into something I didn't even have the language for, and my parents had probably nodded along while she did it. "I'll get you everything I can," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart pounded. After hanging up, I spent the next hour digging through files in my home office. It was like peeling back layers of my own life. Old leases, tax forms, contracts, documents I'd long since stopped thinking about. And then I found it. An old business registration form, dated 18 months ago. My name, my address, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. Celeste hadn't even tried to mimic my handwriting well. She'd signed for me like I was nothing more than a line she could fill out on a form. I stared at the paper for a long time. It should have been pure anger, but there was grief in it too. A hollowing out feeling that came from knowing this hadn't been a one-time thing. Celeste had been using me as her safety net for years, and the truth I'd been avoiding was that our parents probably knew. They'd always protected her. Maybe they thought this was just another little mess for me to absorb. I couldn't do it at home anymore. I grabbed my laptop and stuffed the papers into a folder, driving to the cafe down the street for better Wi-Fi and a printer. Elara tagged along, insisting she didn't want me to be alone. She sat across from me with a hot chocolate while I scanned and labeled every document, organizing them into neat digital folders. "Mom," she said at one point, "why do they think you'll just fix everything?" I glanced at her, surprised by the sharpness of the question. "Because that's what I've always done," I admitted. "And I let them think I would keep doing it." Her face softened. "Then maybe it's time they see you don't have to." It hit me like a spark, quiet but illuminating. By the time we left the cafe, I had a full packet of evidence prepared for the detective. I'd never felt so exposed or so focused. This wasn't just about proving I didn't do it. It was about showing them all, my sister, my parents, that if they wanted me to be the strong one, they'd see just how strong I could be. Back at home, I placed the last folder on my desk, labeling it in bold letters, "For legal review." As I pushed the chair back, my phone lit up. Blocked number. I hesitated, then answered, "We need to talk, tonight." I knew it was her before I even picked up, Celeste. There's a particular kind of silence when you're waiting for someone to speak, and you already know it'll be poison when they do. "Meet me tonight," she said. No hello, no apology, just an order. By 6, I was sitting in a small cafe on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where people work on laptops while sipping overpriced espresso. I picked a corner table facing the entrance, wanting to see her before she saw me. My hands curled around a lukewarm cup of tea, my to-do list for the day folded neatly next to me like armor. The hum of low conversations and clinking cups couldn't settle my nerves. She arrived exactly on time, of course. Celeste always did love making an entrance. Her blonde hair was pulled into an elegant chignon, her designer coat fitted perfectly, and she moved with that entitled grace of someone who thinks the world owes them space. Without glancing at me, she went to the counter, ordered a latte like she was here for a casual meeting, then finally drifted toward my table. "You didn't need to involve the police," she said, as she slid into the chair across from me, crossing her legs like this was just another Tuesday. "That was dramatic." I stared at her, letting the words hang between us. "Dramatic?" My voice was low, even, but I could feel the heat building in my chest. "You used my name, my address. You sent me a box you knew would put me in the middle of a criminal investigation, and you call my response dramatic?" Celeste tilted her head, lips curling into a patronizing smile. "You're overreacting. It's just business paperwork. You're stronger than this, Joy. You've always been the one who can handle things." There it was again, the weaponized compliment. I reached into my bag, pulled out the copies of the documents I'd spent the morning organizing, and slid them across the table, That's my signature on a business registration form, I said. Except it isn't mine. You forged it, and you didn't even try that hard to make it look real. Her hand twitched slightly before she picked up the papers. For a brief moment, her mask cracked. She didn't expect me to come prepared. Don't act so shocked, I continued. You've been doing this for years. Credit cards, apartments, whatever you couldn't qualify for, you handed to me to clean up. And I let you because I thought keeping the peace was worth my silence. But this, you've gone too far. Celeste set the papers down, her smile gone now. You think you've had it so bad? You, with your stable job and your cute little house and your perfect daughter? You've always had everything. I just wanted a chance, and Mom and Dad knew that. They told me you could handle it. Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. They told you what? That you'd survive it, she said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. They've always said that about you. You can lose things and bounce back. I can't. You don't know what it's like to always be the one they're terrified will break. My chest tightened, but not out of sympathy. So they gave you permission to destroy my life because I'm strong enough to survive it? That's your defense? Celeste leaned forward, her voice softening like we were sharing a secret. It's not like that. It's family. They just know you'll be okay. There was the truth, laid bare in her casual tone. I wasn't a person to them. I was the family safety net, the expendable one. For years, I'd been called the strong one, like it was a compliment, but now I saw it for what it really was, a free pass for them to treat me as disposable. I stood up, sliding the documents back into my bag. You think I'm the strong one? You're about to find out how right you are. But it won't be in the way you think. Celeste's eyes widened just for a second. She wasn't used to me leaving without fixing her mess. As I walked toward the door, she called after me, her voice sharper now. If you do this, you'll destroy the family. I didn't even turn around. The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from my mother, and it was worse than I imagined. Her voice was sharp, stripped of the sugary tone she used when pretending to care. Joy, you need to come here. We need to talk about what you've done. This can't go on. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long minute, staring at the sunlight cutting across the carpet. What I'd done. That voicemail told me everything. They weren't panicking because of Celeste. They were panicking because of me. Alara looked up from her cereal at the kitchen table when I came out, already dressed and holding my car keys. Are you going to Grandma's? She asked. Just for a little bit, I said, managing a small smile. I need to clear some things up. She frowned, her 10-year-old instincts sharper than most adults. Do you want me to come? I shook my head. Not this time. Stay here. Do some reading. I'll be back before lunch. By the time I pulled into their driveway, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. The house looked the same as it had my whole life. Perfectly trimmed hedges, an American flag in the yard, the faint scent of my mother's roses drifting through the air. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Inside, they were waiting for me like a tribunal. My mother sat on the couch, arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. My father stood near the window, hands in his pockets like a man who wanted to look neutral but had already chosen a side. You're tearing this family apart over paperwork, my mother said before I'd even shut the door. I laughed. It came out harsher than I meant. Paperwork? That's what you're calling forged signatures and police investigations now? Her face tightened. You didn't need to go to the authorities. We could have handled this quietly. Handled it? I stepped closer, heart pounding but voice steady. Did you know she used my name? Did you know I could go to prison for this? Silence. My mother glanced at my father, then back at me. We thought they'd just seize the items. No one was supposed to dig deeper. I felt my stomach turn. So you did know? She looked away, folding her arms tighter. It was supposed to be simple. You weren't going to get in trouble. You're making it bigger than it needs to be. My father finally spoke, his voice calm in that infuriating way he had when trying to end a fight. Joy, you don't have kids. You can bounce back. She can't. My jaw dropped. Excuse me? You've always been resilient, he said like it was a compliment. Celeste, she's fragile. You know that. This would have destroyed her. I stared at him, barely believing what I was hearing. So you decided my life is worth less than hers? That I'm disposable? Don't twist this, my mother snapped. We were trying to protect the family. No, I said quietly, my voice shaking more from anger than fear. You were protecting her. At my expense. And you'd have let me take the fall if it came to that, wouldn't you? Neither of them said anything. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small USB drive, and set it on the coffee table between us. That, I said, has copies of every document Celeste forged with my name, and my full written statement. It's already been sent to the authorities, so whatever happens next, it's on you. My mother's eyes went wide, her composure finally cracking. Joy, think about what you're doing. If you do this, we'll lose everything. I slung my bag back over my shoulder. So will I if I don't. As I walked out, I heard her voice breaking behind me. Joy, please. But I didn't look back. 3 weeks later, the news broke. And the family name wasn't clean anymore. It was a Wednesday morning when I saw it. I'd been standing in the kitchen, sipping my coffee with the local news humming in the background, barely paying attention. Then the anchor's voice caught my ear. In a breaking development, Minneapolis authorities have charged Celeste Winton with multiple counts of business fraud and forgery. 2 associates, identified as her parents, Margaret and David Winton, face fines for aiding and abetting. I froze, mug halfway to my lips. They even said our last name. It was surreal, hearing it stripped of its careful facade, no longer attached to the respectable family my parents loved to present to the world. It wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. And for once, it wasn't me they were dragging through the mud. My phone rang before I could fully process it. The caller ID displayed private number, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. Miss Winton? A familiar voice said when I answered. Yes? This is Detective Hale. I wanted to inform you that the investigation is wrapping up. Your statement was pivotal in building the case. I'm also calling to confirm that you're officially cleared of all suspicion. You're not part of this case anymore. I exhaled slowly, leaning against the counter for support. So it's over? As far as you're concerned, yes. You did the right thing, Ms. Winton. You protected yourself. His voice softened slightly, as if he knew the weight those words carried for me. And for what it's worth, that was brave. Brave. I didn't feel brave. Mostly, I felt like someone who had been standing in the middle of a battlefield for months and finally heard the gunfire stop. Thank you, I managed. After we hung up, I stood in silence for a moment. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the clock. Everything sounded louder than it should, as if the house itself understood something had shifted. Mom? Alara's voice pulled me back. She padded into the kitchen, her hair sticking up from sleep. Hey, baby, I said, crouching down to meet her eyes. Are you okay? It surprised me how much that simple question made my throat tighten. I nodded. I think I am. She tilted her head. You always tell me to stand up for myself. You really did it, Mom. That hit deeper than anything the detective said. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her small frame against me. I guess I did. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing her that no one, not even family, had the right to decide my worth. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the garage, staring at the box. The same one that started all of this. It had been shoved into a corner, untouched for weeks. I hadn't been able to bring myself to open it, partly out of fear, partly out of defiance. I walked over and crouched down. The cardboard was still sealed, the tape now dusty and peeling at the edges. I traced my finger over the Sharpie-scrawled return address, remembering how my hands shook the day it arrived. Elara peeked into the garage. "Are you going to open it now?" I shook my head. "No. Some things don't deserve to take up space in our lives." I stood, picked it up, and walked it out to the big green dumpster by the curb. For a moment, I just held it there, letting the weight of it settle in my hands. Not the actual weight, but everything it represented. Then I tossed it in. The thud it made when it hit the bottom was louder than I expected. "I can't make them see me," I said softly, more to myself than to Elara. "But I can stop letting them use me." She came up beside me and slipped her hand into mine. "You're not lost anymore," she said, her voice small but certain. For the first time, I believed her.